Hey guys, I feel like it's been a minute since I have filmed a video for you. I went on vacation and took a road trip to Joshua Tree, but we're back, and we're back with a highly requested review of I'm Thinking of Ending Things. I wanted to get this up before I left because obviously this is a very pressing movie that everyone's talking about right now, but I just couldn't do it, so I apologize. But hopefully you're still excited to hear my thoughts on this movie and book. Also, let's see if I remember how to do a singular movie review where I talk about a movie for more than 5 minutes, because that's the format I'm used to at this point. It's been so long since I've done just like a movie review. One movie, and I will be talking about spoilers a little bit later on in this video in case you haven't seen it, but most of this video will be my general thoughts, a little bit of book and movie comparison, but I will warn you before we get into spoilers. Also, before we get started, I just want to say that I'm starting Halloween content. Well, I've started Halloween content. As you can see, things are changing. I'm in the process of decorating right now, so you will see that video on my main channel, but I will link my 2 Halloween videos I have posted thus far, and I do have a Halloween themed video coming to you guys on this channel as well, so stay tuned for Halloween season because it is my favorite time of year and I'm so excited about it. So let's talk about I'm Thinking of Ending Things. This movie follows a couple, Jake and Lucy, as they go to visit Jake's parents, who are played by Toni Collette and David Thewlis. Sorry if I can't pronounce his name. To me, he's known as Remus Lupin. So they're still in the early stages of their relationship, and Lucy is questioning whether she wants to continue dating Jake. So this is, of course, a very bizarre psychological drama. I wouldn't even say thriller, and I'm not even sure if this is very horrifying or technically a horror movie. I think the book is more of a horror than what the movie turned out to be. Of course, this is based on the book by the same name by Ian Reid, which I believe is his first published work. And this movie is directed by Charlie Kaufman, who is known for his kind of mind-bending type movies, such as Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind and Being John Malkovich. And there are rumors that this is actually going to be the last movie that Charlie Kaufman directs. So I'm going to compare the book and movie a little bit, but I wanted to give my overall thoughts of the book, just like a general review of the book itself, and then a general review of the movie, and then we'll kind of go over comparison and spoilers. Now, I do want to say that this is probably, a lot of people feel a lot of ways about this book and this movie because it is so strange and it's going to have very polarizing opinions. So this is just my opinion. Keep in mind, if you disagree, please tell me why in the comments. So let's start with a general overview of the book. So I read this book completely in one day, not necessarily in one sitting, but I read it in one day, which is actually how Ian Reid wanted this book to be consumed, is in one sitting, which he makes it very easy for you to be able to do that. And I'm not much of a reader, so the fact that I could read it in one day is pretty telling. It is a shorter novel, and the way it's written, it's super fast paced. It's like a page turner. You just constantly want to get on to the next scene, and not in a bad way. It's very like gripping. Also, all of the events take place in one day with a few flashbacks here and there. Both the book and the movie do this, so it is easy to continue to read. It's not like too complex necessarily. I actually really enjoyed how this book was written. The pacing of the book is really good, even during the droning car scenes when they're talking about nothing really. It's relevant stuff, but it seems like nothing, and the way it's written is very strange. And then also you have little tidbits of police officers having a conversation that are like italicized, so you don't know necessarily what's going on, but you are like desperate to get to the point and what they're talking about, so it is very well paced. So even though the book is a little bit more of a horror, I would say, than the movie, I still don't think it's as horrifying. I think a lot of people, because of the ending, were just mind blown, which it is a mind blowing kind of book and movie. But I don't know if it's as horrifying as everyone makes it out to be. I have heard that the audiobook is very terrifying and has been recommended that if you're going to read the book at all, you listen to the audiobook version because of the ending. And I'll get into spoilers and like why and the ending later in this video with a warning. Now, personally, this might be, I don't know if this is a popular opinion or unpopular opinion, I don't know, but I personally don't like the characters in this, kind of, and I'll talk about why again in spoilers. I'm sorry, most of this, or most of my like strong opinions are gonna be in spoilers, but I don't like the characters. They come off as very pretentious, the way that they speak, and it's the way that they are written that makes them unlikable in my opinion. I just couldn't stand some of the dialogue and the way they spoke to each other, which is relevant to the story, so it's not like I can like dog on that too much because obviously it was needed for the story. It makes sense, and big picture I don't hate it as much, but like looking at the individual characters, if you can, is just not, they're just not likable. And the writing is very harsh, and if that makes sense, it's very blunt, and it's not my favorite type or style of writing because it doesn't flow very well. It's just very blunt and harsh, and sentences written like thoughts. It's not like smooth like butter, like you're reading a sentence and it just flows. This book is not like that. Again, the way it's written is very relevant to the actual story and the ending, so I appreciate the artistic choice of writing it like that, but it is not my favorite style by any means. It is easy to read because the sentences are so short and, like I said, written like thoughts, so it's like you're reading someone's thoughts, which makes it entertaining and the pacing really fast. But generally it's not going to be a book for everyone. So those are my general thoughts on the book, just overall. Let's move on to my general thoughts about the movie. So the movie has a completely different way of telling this story. Instead of the police officers talking in the books, which I don't think would translate well into a film adaptation, so I understand the choice here. They decided to put in footage of a janitor throughout the movie, and that's going to be very confusing if you have not seen the book or seen the movie or read the book. There's scenes of a janitor thrown in there, and it's kind of jarring when you're watching the movie because you're just like, who is this? And obviously if you read the book, you understand what's going on, but if you went in without reading the source material, you're gonna have no idea what's going on. Also, like I mentioned, the pacing of the book was really good. The pacing of the movie was not so good. It did not translate well. I know that they were trying to stay true to those scenes as best they could with the droning car scenes, as I like to call them, where they talk and talk and talk endlessly about nothing. And while they did execute the harshness of the writing in the movie with the short sentences, thoughts being spoken out loud, and just the very like the harshness, I don't know how else to describe it. If you've seen it or read the book, you know what I'm talking about. There's really short sentences that don't flow. It translated well from the book because that's how the book is written, but the content was not as interesting. I feel like they changed a lot of that and put in a lot of references into these kind of conversations that if you don't know the references, you're not going to pick up on them. Not just from the source material, but from just things in general, just, you know, plays, things. So the movie itself almost felt a little pretentious, kind of like the characters feel like it, because they're throwing in stuff that not everyone is going to catch and not everyone's going to understand. So the movie in these scenes of them talking and talking is so much harder to get through than when you're reading the book. And they spend about 40 minutes of the movie in the car talking. These scenes last for 40 minutes, and this movie is just over 2 hours. So over a quarter of this movie is spent on these droning scenes, and I just don't like that choice for the movie. Although it is a big part of the book as well, it flowed so much better and was so much easier to get through than the movie. I felt like the movie was a little bit too long to begin with anyway. So my biggest issue, if you couldn't tell, I don't really like this movie. My biggest issue with this movie is that you had to have read the book in order to understand the movie, and I don't like when adaptations do that. I want to be able to watch the movie and understand it without necessarily having read the source material. Not everyone's going to read the book, even though it is based on a book. They changed so much of it that the ending is completely different than the book, so it really doesn't matter anyway. You still have no idea what's going on, but you just cannot understand this movie without reading the book. And I know that a lot of people had to look up the explanation for the ending of this after watching it because they hadn't read the book. Even if you have read the book, how many times am I gonna say read the book, read the book? If you have read the book, they, like I said, they changed the ending so much that it's not even what we're expecting anymore, and the book readers are thrown off by what is going on. And I just don't like when movies do that, because you want to go in expecting a certain thing if you've read it, and I felt like this movie made it way too artsy just for art's sake, just to make it weird. and I don't like weird for weird's sake necessarily. It's not really my cup of tea. Honestly, the ending was almost insulting to everyone. The people who read the book and those who didn't. It was like, how are we supposed to figure that out exactly if you didn't read it? And also if you did read it, that's insulting to us because the ending of the book is so famous and is so good. Why would you change it that much? Well, I still understand a lot of the symbolism that they chose to do throughout the movie and in the ending, because I did read it, so I knew what the like overarching ending really was and what the big reveal was. It's still like, you wouldn't be able to pick up on those things had you not been looking for them. So you would either have to watch this movie, look up an explanation, and then watch it again in order to really understand if you haven't read it. And that to me is just so pretentious for them to do that and make it that artistic to where you just don't get it unless you look stuff up about it. And there really is very little payoff in this movie for what we're being put through. It's almost torture to watch some of these car scenes. They just go on too long. I like the artistic choice because, like I said, in the book, they are there, those scenes are there, but it's just easier in the book, and it didn't translate well to the adaptation, so it felt like torture to get through these scenes and really no payoff at all, and nothing really happens. You're like paying attention because you think this stuff is going to be important, and there are hints and symbolism throughout these conversations, obviously, but to pay attention to the whole thing, it was a struggle. All of that being said, I will say that I absolutely loved the scenes that took place in Jake's parents' house. Toni Collette is amazing. It's unfortunate that she's been in a couple bad horror movies like Velvet Buzzsaw and this one, but I really, really liked her performance in both, to be fair. She is amazing, but I really liked her performance in this one. It is so good. Those scenes in their house are so trippy and mind-bendy, and you have no idea what's going on. It causes a lot of anxiety, but not necessarily in a bad way for me. They play with time really creatively in these scenes, and although they did change some things from the book, I really liked these changes and the way they did this for the movie. You're, as the viewer, are questioning everything going on, including Lucy's reaction to everything and the time bending that they're doing. It just doesn't make sense, but it all is still relevant, and there's little like hints and symbolism throughout, which I love. I appreciate that every artistic choice in the movie was intentional. Every little thing had a purpose for being there, kind of like a poem. It's like every word has to mean something. And while I did find the book and the movie pretentious at times, I did like these little symbolisms and hints throughout that were very small but also very relevant and important. I just don't think that this is the best book to movie adaptation because they changed so much from the book. They didn't even include the best parts of the book, which is the ending. I mean, they didn't include any of that, the police officers talking. So personally, I would recommend skipping this movie, especially if you haven't read the book. But even if you did read the book and you haven't seen the movie yet, it's not worth it. It's not going to be what you think it's going to be, which is so unfortunate because after reading the book and seeing the trailer, I was so excited for this movie because how could it go wrong, right? It's gonna be weird and mind-bending and just strange, and it had good actors in it, but it was a huge, huge letdown, especially in the end. My jaw literally dropped when the ending happened. I just don't think it has enough redeeming qualities. I do love the scenes in Jake's parents' house. Like, those scenes are beautiful. Love them. I just think that it's horrifying without being too much. So I appreciate those scenes because it does make this movie kind of horrific, if you want to label it a genre, I guess. And those were the most similar parts to the book. So if they had stayed true to more of the book, I think this movie could have been so good, but they decided to make some really strange artistic choices, especially in the ending, that just don't make sense. Completely changed from the book, which the ending of the book is the best part. So I would skip it if I were you. Now, even though I've kind of compared the two as we've been talking about the general review, I thought we would compare them a little bit deeper and talk about spoilers. So if you haven't seen it or read it and you want to, don't watch the rest of this video, or if you just don't care, you can of course watch this video. So I mentioned the harsh writing both in the book and the movie and how it's important because, like I've said, they're written like thoughts, and that's because they are thoughts. This is one person thinking. This whole movie and book is one person. Every character that we see is one person. The main character is actually the janitor that we see sprinkled in throughout the movie, which I was not a fan that they threw in janitor scenes so early on in this movie, because it felt like flashbacks, but he was older and it didn't make any sense. And I think they did that because they didn't really wrap up the ending and reveal that this is all one person taking place inside one person's head. So they threw in the janitor clips because they couldn't do the police officer talking, I guess, about the crime scene of the janitor. So yeah, the main character and only character in this book and movie is the janitor who has dissociative identity disorder. So when I finished reading the book and I said how good it was, I did get some questions like, well, didn't you think it was a little exploitative, because they obviously use mental illness as a means to show, like, as a twist. It's like a plot point that makes you think like, oh, he's just crazy, and I don't like when they do that. You know, does it paint him, the main character, as a typical crazy person, especially given his violent end? Well, it is like a hard pill to swallow when you're reading it. I personally did not see this twist coming because I had heard many things about the ending, and I was reading and I'm like, where is this gonna go? Like, how, I don't understand how this ending is so big, and then it happens and you're just like, oh my god. So as you guys know, I'm a little bit more critical of the use of mental illness in media and its use for entertainment only purposes, but I didn't find that this book was that exploitative. Maybe a little bit. It was very shocking to see that that's the route that they chose to take, but I don't think it was too exploitative. I don't know, I usually have complicated opinions when it comes to this kind of stuff. And given that this was kind of the twist, that's why I don't really consider this to be a horror necessarily, because I don't find people with mental illness horrifying, or it's not like a thriller, you know? Although throughout the book you're like in suspense, the twist is supposed to be kind of like a horror, I guess, but I don't find that like horror. I don't know. It's rather a really sad commentary on this man's life and his struggles with DID. And I think this is why he ends up being pretty much the only redeemable character, the only likable character, because everyone else, all the other characters, aren't necessarily fleshed out because they are part of him, if that makes sense. It's a personality of his, which is why they don't feel likable or even like full real people. They act very strange. Even the main characters of Jake and Lucy, they act very strange, and the way that they talk is very strange. So it's clear when you know the twist that they're not fully fleshed out real people, if that makes sense. And this is why I hated the movie ending so much, because they do not make this clear. I watched this movie with two of my friends, and we watched it over Discord, a Netflix party, and I was the only one that had read the book. So after the movie ended, we were all like, and I was so mad, and I had to sit there and explain the ending of the book to my friends because they had no idea. And after I told them the ending, they were like, I did not get that at all. Like I said, the book uses police officers talking very vaguely about a person that you don't know who it is. It's about the janitor who ends up dying, but you don't know any of that yet. So it's very suspenseful in that you're like, who are they talking about? Which one? Like, are they talking about Jake? But then in the movie, they throw in the clips of the janitor, and my friends kept being like, who is the janitor? Why are there clips of a janitor at a school all of a sudden when it's just a couple driving to his house? I don't think that the janitor scenes in the movie added as much suspense as the police officers talking in the book did. And if anything, it made it much more confusing in the movie because of how they chose to do that and insert clips of that instead of how they did it in the book. I think even if you've read the source material for this movie, you're still going to be dumbfounded and so confused by the ending of this movie because it is so unlike the book. Charlie Kaufman decided to go a really artistic route with it, and it makes sense given who he is and what kind of movies he makes, but it just felt like an inspired movie. It wasn't a direct adaptation. Not that it has to be. It's okay to make changes. I liked some of the changes he made throughout the rest of the movie, but the ending, the way he chose to do the reveal, wasn't even a reveal, and it was so subtle and vague. You had to pick up on every single hint along the way in order to even come close to that conclusion. I would just say that the last 20 minutes of the movie had nothing to do with the book at all, and I was so confused through all of this, and I felt a little mad. I felt a little offended when the movie ended because I was just blown away that they decided to go that route and that artsy fartsy with it, because although it's not my favorite book I read this year, I enjoyed the book. It was good. It's not, you know, the best book ever, but I enjoyed it, and I was looking forward to the adaptation in this movie, and I just felt kind of mad when it ended. Like, I waited for that. I read this book for that. I just think the movie was overall very frustrating, and this is coming from someone who actually read the book. So if you didn't read the book, you're probably 10 times more frustrated than I am. Like I said, this is going to have very differing opinions, I think, especially if you've read the book. Please let me know your opinions on this movie down below. Were you as disappointed as I was with it? If you've read it, what were your thoughts? Did you think that the artsiness of it was cool? Did you enjoy it? I don't know. I'm very disappointed. I'm very upset about this movie. Although loved the scenes in the house. That was hands down the best part. If you could find those scenes just isolated somewhere on the internet, just watch those. Those are great. They really know how to make you feel uncomfortable and anxious in the best way possible. So highly recommend those scenes. But there's no need to watch the rest of the movie after that. So anyway, let me know your thoughts down below. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.